Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar for June, Overhead Door Successfully Merging Rival Cultures. My name is Karen Luce. I'm the Director of Learning and Development here at Denison Consulting, and I'm your host for today's webinar. And we're very happy to have both Ken Mahlke and Jeff Alvis with us today to talk about mergers and acquisitions. So quickly before we get started, I want to go over a couple of technical things. We're going to present today for about 40 minutes, and then we're going to use the remainder of our time to go through some question and answers that are going to be sent in by you, our audience members. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a control panel, and you can use that to send in your questions. We ask that you send in your questions throughout the presentation rather than waiting for the end, because this gives us some time to go through them, organize them a little bit, and then really make the most of that question and answer session. We'll try to get through as many of the questions as we can, and we do apologize if we don't get to your specific question, but we're going to make every effort to follow up with you after the webinar. I also want to let you know that a copy of today's webinar is going to be archived, and a recorded copy is going to be archived on our website so that you can access it later on and share it with others if you like. We're going to email all of you once that is ready. So now to get started, I'd like to introduce our speakers to you. Ken Mahlke is the Vice President of Overhead Door Corporation. He is an accomplished executive with a track record for partnering with leadership teams in a global organization to create a brand and culture that embraces change and develops and retains powerful employees. Ken recently headed up the successful cultural integration effort of Overhead Door and Wayne Dalton. These are two leading competitors in the residential, commercial, and industrial garage door market. Ken is joined by Jeff Alvis. Jeff Alvis is a director with the Keystone Group, leading operational due diligence, integration planning, and post-close execution efforts for manufacturing and distribution clients. Jeff has worked on domestic and international deals ranging from $10 million to $8 billion across various industries and helping clients to achieve seamless transitions and accelerated synergy capture. The Keystone Group partnered with Overhead Door and with Denison to ensure that these integration efforts were going to be successful. So now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Jeff to get us started.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks to all of you in the audience for spending part of your day with us. We really appreciate it. Ken's going to do most of the heavy lifting today, but I'd like to share just a couple words about Keystone and provide a little context for the rest of the presentation and what you'll hear from Ken. Our firm, Keystone's been in business for 20 years, and we've helped lots of companies like Overhead Door execute successful deals, supporting their teams during operational diligence, pre-close planning, and post-close execution work related to those deals. I have to say Overhead was a great client to work with, and not just because Ken happens to be helping today, but they had a great team. And as you'll see and hear from Ken, they had a very comprehensive and very strong view of how to deal with all the people issues, culture being a primary one of those. So he'll talk a lot more about that. At Keystone, when we work with clients through the various deal stages, we break the integration problem into three concurrent and related work streams. The first one you can see at the top is what we call day one in our shorthand, and that's all around business continuity. So how do you successfully ensure that when the deal closes and you turn the lights on with the new company, that the company's going to operate the way that it should? How are we going to serve customers? How are we going to invoice? How are we going to collect cash? Making sure that no balls get dropped along the way so that the deal is actually successful from a core business standpoint. The second work stream is pretty straightforward, but that's about identifying and planning how to execute on synergies and risks in the deal. So those generally are the things where 1 + 1 is supposed to equal 3, and we have a set of tools and an approach to make sure that those ideas get captured, and more importantly that the right ones get resourced so you can hit the ground running and be successful in creating incremental value. The third, and the one we'll focus on most today, is we call it soft goods, but that deals with all the human capital related issues in the transaction. That's everything from things like organization structure, compensation, benefits, communications, and importantly, and we'll talk a lot today about how do you integrate the culture and the people effectively into the new organization. Not surprisingly, particularly in the last couple of years, we found a lot of interest, a lot more interest in dealing with cultural issues than we did, say 4 or 5 years ago. I think it used to be thought that culture was all the fuzzy, touchy-feely stuff, and let's go about grabbing the synergies, and let's go about making this happen from a business point of view, and I think a lot of the people issues often get left aside. And as Ken will talk, it's important to get on those early, even in diligence, begin understanding where differences might lie and what your plan is to do about those things, so that once the deal's implemented, those things don't get in the way. And you can see from this this chart, and this is based on some research we've done and asking lots of our clients about, where did deals go wrong? Was it because you made a lousy deal? Did competitors react differently than you thought? Or did you not implement it well in terms of bringing the right people over, putting them in the right jobs, and understanding how to both deal with and integrate the two different cultures of the acquirer and the target? Okay. And again, we believe culture is actually very, very important in terms of making the deal work successfully. And we look at it as a fairly complicated problem. And it's not uncommon that we'll get engaged and we'll start talking to the leadership team about the culture of the other company. And I'll say, oh yeah, they're just like us. Look at their mission statement, look at their core values, look at their website. You walk through the plants and they talk about safety. They talk about people are their most important asset. And that's all interesting and that's all good. But unless you can really peel back the onion and get below the water line a little bit, it's hard to understand what really happens. So it's important to really get a better feel for how do those values actually get implemented? What kind of behavior gets rewarded? What's good and bad? How do they make decisions? How do they conduct meetings? How are performance metrics used? So it's very important to get below that surface level, and again, early in the process, so that as you begin to get closer to close and kick off the the new company, that you've begun to put plans in place to deal with those issues. Well, we'll talk a little bit more today about Denison specifically and how, and Ken will talk about how they use that tool as part of this approach. I believe it's important to look at this a little more comprehensively. So we've found that the Denison tool is actually a great data-driven, it's analytical, and there's a lot of detail that one can dive into to get at different levels of the problem, and more importantly, to get at very specific issues that you can actually take action on, which I think is the only reason to do the survey in the first place. But that notwithstanding, the important thing is also to look at other factors. So we do a lot of work. We interview people. We encourage the acquirer to make sure that they meet as many people as they can, to be in the business environment as much as they can, to understand what really happens and how things truly work. So when you combine not only the results from the Denison tool, but rub those up against what you see and observe and what people tell you and how they behave, gives you a more comprehensive picture that you can actually go take action on and deliver specific plans that are going to make a difference at the end of the day. So with that, I appreciate your time, and I'll turn it over to Ken to get into the meat of the day.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Ken Mahlke. I'm the head of human resources for Overhead Door here in Dallas, Texas. I'd like to thank Jeff for helping us, sort of lay the foundation, establish good reasons why this notion of cultural integration of acquisitions are so critical. And I'd like to thank Karen with Denison for providing us with the opportunity to get together and to talk about acquisition integration. And so in our time today, my plan is to provide you with some context, first of all, for the importance we place on cultural integration, including our company's strong convictions about leadership, talent engagement, and our quest to get, grow, engage, and keep what we call powerful people. Then we'll talk a little bit about our industry, our company, our at-that-time acquisition target, our process of integration, including cultural integration. So here's just a quick look, again, to supply you with some of that context, and I'll set the scene for our perspectives on corporate culture and how our leadership team regards talent. We have an HR function who relies heavily on research-based solutions. So our HR mission statement talks about the importance we place on, as Jim Collins has said, first getting the right people, and this is what we call powerful people, on the bus. And our vision statement that you can see here speaks excuse me, of an enabling these powerful people to achieve some great results. There's lots of definitions of leadership. This is one that we wrote that we think best captures how we see our role, especially when it comes to leading people. And this says inspiring and enabling others to work together to achieve extraordinary results. So if we break down that definition a bit, we mention inspiring people, which we think is analogous to this notion of engagement. And if you look at work from Gallup and Marcus Buckingham's Q12 to Corporate Leadership Council's extensive research on the subject, they come up with this definition of engagement. So the idea becomes, how do we create conditions where people decide to work diligently and to remain employed with the company? And for the business people in the crowd, I wanted to give us a quick slide on why it's so important for businesses to want engaged people. According to Gallup, who did the research on this, it's clear that engaged people have a much higher customer satisfaction level in their organizations. They have better employee retention. They're more likely to have higher productivity, better safety records, and most of all, they nearly double the profitability and earnings per share of their industry counterparts. So I mentioned this idea of powerful people. I think it's important for us to talk about how this is an important part of our culture, because as we're prospectively looking at integrating an organization in, we have to make sure that their priorities are in sync with ours. So if you think about the notion of powerful people, I think a lot of things come to mind. Powerful people are skilled. They have strong capabilities that we seek to enhance. They are engaged by the definition we just gave. Our leaders create conditions where employees can be engaged. They're empowered, and I kind of like this phrase, I'm on it. You know, we want all our people to be go-to people, and we want to create in them this sense of empowerment that says, if there's a problem, I'm on it, particularly when it comes to customers. They're equipped, they have the right tools and equipment to do the job, and they're fulfilled. You know, they're rewarded appropriately for their good results. So our culture has a heavy focus on the talent agenda. In summary, we approach a significant acquisition with a heavy agenda in that area. And I'll admit that some of these are more aspirational than actual, but we do want a place where powerful people can do what they do best every day. We want secure leaders in our organization who aren't afraid to pick and grow succession candidates. We want to create this employer brand, and it's a place where all the top people gather. We want a learning environment that fosters individual and collective growth. We want business processes and tools that make it easy and efficient for people to do what they do best. And we want rewards for performance. So as I stated, the cultural dynamics of any acquisition we're preparing to enter into are critical. So now quickly, I want to just give you context for our marketplace and at the time of the acquisition. First of all, just to give you some context, the garage door industry in the U.S. was a little less than $2 billion. And the recession, I think most of you are aware that there was this recession, and some argue that it continues. But it caused reduction in construction starts and increasing price competition. The capacity in our marketplace had exceeded demand, causing a need for acquisition to reduce capacity. And we had a wide range of potential targets in our funnel, and we chose Wayne Dalton due to complementary distribution channels and products, their advanced manufacturing technology, and the strong possibility of achieving synergies that would flow directly to our bottom line. First, a little about Overhead Door then. Overhead Door is, at that time, about a $700 million division of Sanwa Shutters, which is about a $3.5 billion organization in Tokyo. Been around for about 90 years, 4 divisions that represent a variety of access solutions and multi-channel, sort of complex distribution that I won't go into too much detail about. Overhead Doors Dallas, more precisely Lewisville, Texas based. At that time we had 15 plants and 24 sales centers. We had strength in commercial doors and openers and multi-channel distribution. And you know, we could talk about all of the acquisition candidates at that point, and we did, and we went through a very systematic process to try to determine which one or ones were optimal. And we arrived at Wayne Dalton. Wayne Dalton was a 54-year-old, $450 million privately held door and opener business located in Mount Hope, Ohio. It's well respected in the industry for innovation and speed to market. Certainly strong in areas complementary to our business, a strong distribution channel as well, and also possessed a strong probability of synergies. And this was an arch rival of ours, a competitor. We competed on many battlefields, you know, for customers out in the marketplace. So once we determined mutual interests, we began due diligence with a priority, as usual, on probable or possible deal breakers or areas of material financial impact. And our first step was to do something really smart. We retained the Keystone Group. While several of us had and had led successful acquisitions and mergers in the past, we wanted the support of someone who does it every day and, of course, does it well. And so we partnered up then with the Keystone Group. So once the letter of intent was sent and due diligence was about to wrap up, we were already well down the road on a comprehensive communication and change management process, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Well aware of Keystone's warnings that 70% of acquisition problems were due to people issues. We met with our team and developed some key messages for a wide variety of audiences. And this is absolutely a key step that we're so happy we did, and we spent a lot of time on this. Questions like, why were we doing this? Why were we characterizing this acquisition as a merger? How it would impact our customers, make us stronger and better capable of providing effective solutions. How it will impact our channels and products, our employees, and timing for milestone events. And again, we brought most of our senior leadership team and key people in our organization together to establish those key messages early on, and this was under advice from Keystone. The messages were used to create all future communications to ensure consistency now and in the future. We scheduled and held a meeting of the chief executives on both sides, direct reports at what we call the Dallas Mothership. We scheduled key employee assessments to conduct talent due diligence. You know, I talked earlier about the financial and deal breaker due diligence, and we ascribed equal weight to talent due diligence in this case. And we developed and scheduled new employee orientations in all locations. And we were aware that there were some potential cultural issues. Jeff alluded to this earlier, and certainly I did. Number one, we were fierce competitors on the battlefields. We had interactions with the senior management that were very positive, but some competitiveness and kind of one-upsmanship in those meetings was noticed. And candidly, Wayne Dalton had hit some difficult times. They had had some layoffs. They had had some pay reductions. They had discontinued their 401k match. They had had some furloughs and that sort of thing. Wayne Dalton, however, was more entrepreneurial. They were more creative and innovative. They were faster to move. Overhead Door, because of our being under the umbrella of a publicly held Japanese-based company and under the influence of Japanese Sarbanes-Oxley, so to speak, we were more structured and planful. So Keystone recommended Denison to help us understand our culture and that of Wayne Dalton, and to develop a third alternative that isn't Wayne Dalton and isn't Overhead Door, but a powerful, as we called it, new company, and with a mission to improve the performance of our organizations by improving our corporate leadership and culture, and that is the mission of Denison. So at that point, we became quickly impressed, I would say, with Denison in their presentations, the work they've been doing helping companies become more effective by addressing their cultural issues, and of course their client list. You know, they had an impressive client list. We feel that good people hang out with good people, so, and we're kind of proud they kind of put us on there now too, so that's good. So anyway, they had a great track record of helping companies improve their business, the effectiveness of their culture. They are research-based. We're a company that manages by numbers using data, and so that appealed to us. They have electronic delivery. It's simple, easy to administer. A set of results that are intuitive and pretty simple for even some of our crusty operators to understand. And they had very competitive pricing, as you can see on the bottom there. Briefly, this is a picture of the centerpiece of the output you received from Denison, and I won't go into a lot of detail about their processes and other reports they provide to you, other than to say you can tell at a glance how you're doing on these 4 traits of a high-performance organization. So as you look at this chart and look around this wheel, you can see that these 4 traits of high-performance organization. On the external side, there's adaptability and mission, and on the internal focus, there's involvement and consistency. And each of these has 3 indexes, which hopefully you can read. If you look at on the adaptability side, there's adaptability involvement, which indicates more flexible organizations, and there's mission and consistency on the right side, which indicates more stable organizations. So the color coding, the sort of graphic chart and graphic representation is, as I said, at a glance you can tell what's happening, what's going on. So this is a peek under the covers of our results. We gave the survey to nearly 500 of our salaried employees in key roles, 219 at Wayne Dalton, 255 at Overhead Door, and approximately 85% of the people completed the survey, so we're pretty pleased with that result. We had hoped our 2 cultures weren't radically different. You know, we had meetings with the top leadership of the company, and while we'd recognized, as I mentioned earlier, some subtle differences, we're pleased to see when we saw the result that they weren't that divergent. We also hoped, quite frankly, that there would be some cultural synergy opportunities. In other words, some strengths we had that would complement their improvement needs and vice versa. And this obviously shows the cultures were quite similar. Wayne Dalton's entrepreneurial culture made them more flexible and stronger in the adaptability, which is the upper left quadrant. So on the left side, you see their adaptability. There's more blue. More color means they're stronger in that area. And on our side, you can see less of that. Overhead Door's planful and public culture made them more stable and stronger in mission. And with Wayne Dalton's result in the mission side, we also felt perhaps they were impacted by the uncertainty of being acquired at the time they took the survey. So each had opportunities to learn and grow from each other, and we also get a lot of departmental reports and very, very specific cuts that we requested on how one area compares to another. So with our results in hand and following Denison's thorough and detailed feedback to the senior executives, we embarked on a communication and action planning process. First, we fed back results to the combined executive teams, And we identified some opportunities, and each member of the team committed to developing an improvement action plan. Then we fed back results in local groups to employees. We asked for their input to gain clarity of issues and their improvement thoughts. Third, we developed action plans, and I'll show you a sample of the format we used on a few slides going forward, by department and for the whole company. We committed to follow up in regular executive meetings to ensure that change happens, and then we committed to resurvey in about a year to measure our progress. So this is an example of a format that we put together. It's an excerpt from our action plan development suggestions, and we felt these were important since most leaders, we think they're doing their best to be effective, and they may not know how to address issues that appeared on the survey, or they'd already be doing it. So you see in this sample, this is a sample of an adaptability sort of roadmap for an action plan. You see the indexes on the left-hand column, creating change, customer focus, and organizational learning. And on the right side, we pulled several of our leaders together and with our HR team, and we created some specific development suggestions that leaders could undertake to try to affect improvement in those specific, it's easy for me to say, specific indexes. And here's an example of an action plan format. We use this for a lot of applications. This is a pretty standard who, what, and when. So what is the goal, what's the action, who's responsible, and what's the date? And so we felt committing these actions to writing is pretty darned important because you know, there's a statistic at the bottom of that slide that says you're 30% more likely to achieve goals you commit to writing. And you know, we know that change management efforts are difficult. There's a tremendous gravitational pull to always do what you've always done. And certainly mergers, acquisitions are changes that create dissonance for employees that needs to be attended to through expert change management. So we did resurvey in February of 2011. We had some improvement and some regression. We certainly did lament the regression in some areas. But Denison tells us it may be normal in mergers such as ours. We did spend a tremendous amount of time on communication and integration efforts. And I would say overall we were not surprised at the outcome. But you know, we certainly did repeat the action planning process and will likely resurvey again next year. So I wanted to provide you with some sort of final acquisition tips, and I would just say we're pretty far from being experts in this. You know, we're sort of one in a row, and we got by with a little help from our friends at Keystone and Denison, and really from some great leadership in our organization and great employees in both Wayne Dalton and Overhead Door who made us look good. So first step, I think, and this is just really important, and you know, if you follow Covey's first things first, the first thing is to get a partner early to plan for day one. Keystone's intense focus on day one had us picturing a vision of the future, which was day one, we throw the switch. Now Wayne Dalton and Overhead Door are one. What do we look like? What do we do? Keystone's very good at that. They helped us prepare for it. The second is include talent in due diligence. We think that's awfully important. If anything, I think we would have done our assessments of executives and key salaried leaders earlier in the process. So getting a handle on it, I think it not only is effective for you as an acquiring organization, but it also clearly indicates that if talent's important to your organization, just how important it is. I don't have to tell anyone about the importance of pursuing synergies relentlessly. Keystone has a relentless process. Keystone has relentless people who help you learn a process that you can use for lots of applications. So if you have projects or processes that are operating in your organization that require intense follow-up to come to fruition, they have a wonderful set of processes for that, and it really pays off. The fourth one is communicate breathlessly. I got this phrase from Melissa Reif with Container Store. It's part of their culture to communicate to employees breathlessly, and I like the sound of that. But basically it says you can't over-communicate. Also, as I mentioned, to develop the key messages and stay consistent to them throughout the process. It really helps your credibility as well with all the stakeholders. If you're saying the same thing halfway through the integration and at the conclusion of the integration, post day one that you said pre-day one, it really helps your credibility not only with your employees but certainly with your customers. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but manage change. We utilize John Kotter's 8 steps to successful change to help us properly handle all the change dynamics, not only with acquisition change, but also, we're in the process of an ERP implementation, and we certainly will use that Kotter's 8 steps for that process. They are listed on a poster in our boardroom, and we refer to them often. Involve stakeholders in decision making. I certainly believe that if things don't happen with you, they feel like they're happening to you. So the more people who are involved in it, the more skin they have in the game, and the more likely they are to embrace that change. I would say also getting out and meeting the people early. Get key leaders in the facilities, conveying those key messages, listening to employee issues, and answering questions. So I think that's really important. Develop a day one org chart early. If anything, we could have developed a day one org chart even earlier. So make changes quickly and simultaneously. If part of your synergy includes staff synergy, where you're going to be eliminating duplication, which we did it early. We did it fairly well all at once. We've had maybe more than one wave of reductions, but part of it again, was to eliminate duplication and achieve synergy. There is unrest culturally until people see their name on an official org chart. So getting that org chart out, having leaders explain to people what's their role and that kind of thing, to whom do they answer, to whom or with whom do they communicate, and then understanding our business processes is awfully important. So understanding and addressing any cultural gaps, using a tool like Denison to provide you with a simple and easy to understand action planning process is doggone important. And then developing this synergistic culture. If we recognize that the new company, is going to be the best of both worlds, it means that the culture will not be the same, but it'll be 1 + 1 hopefully = 3. I'd say post-mortem the process, real important while it's fresh. Don't get too busy patting yourself on the back for doing a great job, but learn from it, learn from your mistakes, correct it, and then, as we say, go do the next one. So, if you're like us, and I know we are, the culture is awfully important, and as Jeff said at the start, since people and culture are the primary derailers of an otherwise great merger acquisition 70% of the time, why leave it to chance? Karen?
Well, thank you very much, Ken. We have a slew of questions that have come in during your presentation, so I guess I'm going to start at the beginning here. So this is a question kind of for both of you, both in the idea of what you did and then what you would suggest going forward. But what were your decision criteria around who would be invited to take the initial survey, and why? Would you do that the same if you did it again or differently?
Well, this is Ken. I I would say that our decision was to identify key salaried people in the organization. And we wanted to get a view of, while we strongly believe that all employees impact the culture, and if we want it to be a great place to work, it's everyone's role, not just leadership team, we felt that the people who had the best handle on how things are done around here was some of the key leaders. Now, Denison had recommended that we survey everyone and get a view of it. We felt that the key leaders might be a bit more, I guess, calm and rational in the process. Employees who may be further away from the decision point may just know that something's going to happen, and if we don't do a good job of communicating, usually people will feel that if something's going to happen, it's not good, and that that might wind up skewing our results. So, for us in a manufacturing organization, we picked corporate people, VP level directors. We also picked plant managers. We picked our sales center leaders. We picked our salespeople, out in the organization. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. I have some of my people here telling me things. So, so anyway, that's how we made the decision. If I had it to do again, and when we resurveyed, I think we resurveyed all salaried employees. And so we had somewhat of a broader group, but we also compared apples to apples, because we asked people on the ensuing survey, have you taken this survey before? So we could compare same people to same people, but we also got something of a broader perspective, I think, when we did it. So I think I might do all salaried people, but I'd certainly listen to Denison, advice on, what group to survey. We felt happy with our results. So,
Karen, this is Jeff. I would add, I think in most instances we have chosen to go with the salaried workforce, presuming that includes plant management, supervisory levels, and facilities. Again, for a lot of the reasons that Ken articulated, and but there's a balance between making sure you have enough population to get meaningful results, and also the most important thing I would stress is in doing this is to make sure that you're committed to taking action with the results. And so a lot of times people feel more comfortable that they can affect change at the sort of salary employee level, and that's usually the decision that we've come to. So I would echo a lot of what Ken said as well.
Okay, great, thank you. When you did the results and looked at some of the different data segments, did you see a lot of similarities, or were there a lot of differences between the different levels of the organizations? Were they seeing the culture similarly or different?
I would say, because we got cuts, or we asked for and received cuts by department, and by facility, for both organizations, we could compare, the finance organization, the HR organization, plant managers, the sailing teams, all of that. I would say the results probably were more similar than different. Some of the areas in some of the departments and some of the functions were different from one to another. So Wayne Dalton plus Overhead Doors Financial Group, while those might have been more similar than different, their results might have been different from the sales and marketing side. So we could see, some differences there. And, some of the differences, particularly in our resurvey, where we had made some changes here in our organization, we sure saw the impact of that. And, so we could see that not everybody had been communicated with appropriately and that sort of thing. So we could, really see some of those differences that came up.
Okay.
Karen, I would just add, in our experience, I think, and I'm working with a client today, actually, we're just going through some results this morning, and we were, this is for an internal kind of reorganization they're doing, and we found market differences between the overall division results, and we were drilling into kind of a VP level and a level that reported into the VP, and there were not only differences between each of those sets of results to the overall, but between the VP and the people that reported to them, we found some very interesting differences that will have an impact on what we'll do with the reorganization. So Ken said they got several cuts. I think that's very important to do, not only by different function, but levels within each organization, and then geographically. You'll often find outliers when you have a sales organization or a remote plant, for instance, that may need different attention than a plant that's based at the headquarters. So I think those kind of cuts of the data are really important to come up with the actions that are going to be meaningful and move the needle a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a real good point, Jeff. Certainly the difference between our top level in the organization and the next levels down had a lot of difference. But I think we just found that there was much more similarity among functions than differences, but there certainly were differences by department and by proximity to the corporate offices. That's a very good point, because we may think we're doing a great job of capturing people and communicating well, but in some cases we just aren't.
Okay, great, thank you. This question is coming in from one of our listeners, David. Do you see cultural integration more difficult as you maintained operations, locations, and corporate offices from the acquired sites?
I'm not sure I understand
that. I think what he's asking is, as you're going through the process, was it more difficult as you kept going, as you went along in the process? Did the cultural integration become more difficult in operations and in locations?
Oh, well, I'd say because of our process and our follow-up, the fact that we had action plans, the fact that we followed up on it, we had a weekly meeting called a team lead meeting too, and its primary objective was to address and track synergies. So synergy capture was very important for us, and but other issues like cultural communication issues, that sort of thing, came to us because participants were responsible for some of those locations. So I would say, clearly the closer you get to the kind of epicenter of culture, in a corporate office, the more similarities there are, to, I guess, your espoused culture. Mm-hmm. And the further away you get, maybe the less it gets. We had I mentioned Melissa Reif with Container Store, and we had the good fortune, she's the president of this company who's been, one of Fortune magazine's top 100 places to work for, the last 12 years, and, being number 1 and 2 and 3 for most of those times. But, we had asked her a question about, communicating the strong people talent message, throughout the organization, and part of it had to do with just getting, smart, people-oriented people out in those positions, who naturally would, do a good job of communicating. And it's, it's just part of the fiber of their culture to do a lot of communicating, as I said earlier, breathlessly, to make sure employees are aware of even their financial results. I mean, they tell them the score, because people are competitive and want to know. So, we agree with that, and we think that, that kind of communication does need to be sort of worked into the fiber of the organization, but also supported by, data and processes like this Denison survey.
Okay. Well, what are some of the key learnings or the top best practices that you would take into your next acquisition or your next merger?
Yeah, I would say, it's probably represented on these final acquisition tips. I alluded to a few of them earlier. I would say doing the talent due diligence earlier is a good idea. Certainly partnering up. Even though we have one and we feel like we did a pretty good job of cultural integration, we sort of have one under our belt. I think we would still partner up with Keystone to do anything that's bigger. We've done a few smaller ones, but I think we would certainly partner up early to do that. Getting on top of these synergies quickly is very important. I'd say the day one org chart, taking the time, because everything's happening. There's lots of things going on, but taking the time to get that org chart done quickly and communicated is very, very important. And I don't think you can underestimate the amount of need for involvement in decision making, getting people involved in that decision making process. So those for me are some of those the things that I would do.
Karen, I would add just a couple. I think Ken's slides hit it very, very well. There are a couple of things that we see often, and people come back and tell us, yeah, gee, I wish I would have done that a little bit differently. One of those is, and I think Ken talked about, and they did a great job of this, is to be very candid very early as things are happening. When you buy a company, the company that's being bought, people aren't stupid. They know that's being bought. They know it's being bought for a reason, and they expect that change is going to take place. And if you don't tell them and communicate with them, and obviously you have to figure out what you want to say when, but there aren't a lot of secrets, and if you keep things secret and don't explain to them what's going on and help them understand your thought process and all that kind of stuff, people will always expect the worst. So even, I've had several people that have come to me when we're helping clients with this, and they'll say, boy, this level of communication is great, because even though I just found out I'm only going to be in a transition role for 6 months, at least I know. And now I can go home, my wife's been bugging me every day I come home, what's going on, what's going on. Now I at least have an answer, and even if it's not the exact answer that I hope for, at least I know. And I respect the fact that you told me. So I would say that's one. And a second is, cultures don't integrate by themselves. And when people think about integration, generally speaking, oftentimes they default to, well, gee, if I'm not going to be bringing plants together and cutting a lot of costs and completely absorbing this organization into mine, then I don't really need to worry about a lot of this stuff. I'll leave it kind of stand alone, and I'll let it go, and it'll be fine. And invariably, people come back with us and say, I thought that was a good idea. It really wasn't, because the longer that company went on doing what they did, and we wanted them to do some different things, we just didn't want to force it on them, it became that much harder 6 months or a year later to make that change. So I think it's important to have an integration profile to understand how you're going to integrate, and particularly what you want to do with the culture, and then act accordingly. But to do nothing, I think, is setting yourself up for for disaster. So even if you're not going to shut down plants or consolidate the sales force, there needs to be a thoughtful process to go through, and a thoughtful set of decisions that you make in terms of how you do want to leverage the cultures and bring them together, so if there isn't any ambiguity that people can begin worrying about at the water cooler.
Yes, I think those are both really good points. I mean, I guess if I could add a bullet to mine, I think transparency probably is this umbrella that hangs over everything. I mean, that's kind of our style. We have a CEO's 100% transparent, and we have town halls all the time, and he'll answer any question that he legally can, any time. And the other thing I think is handing employees a written, we call it a talking tool that describes what's going on, is a real big deal. And we do that all the time, even if we're having a plant consolidation, or we're going to close a plant or transfer a plant, or even if it's not good news, we hand employees a talking tool that describes what's happening in this case. So as Jeff said, when they go home at night, they can explain it. On our side, certainly if somebody from the press contacts them, we just had someone call us about a change we made in Ohio from the press, and they had gotten a hold of one of our talking tools, and they had a lot of good information that we had put out about our rationale for it, and which could be different if you just interview a person about it. So I think those are really strong ideas for that. Finally, one last thing that Jeff said. I don't mean to take up too much time, but one last thing. He was talking about integration. A lot of companies may have line of business acquisitions that they want to just let operate. They don't want to mess with them. They don't want to screw it up. And we've made a recent forward integration acquisition that we want to let operate. And there's a lot of process people in our organization that want to change it, structure it, make it operate just like us. But we have to sort of resist that impulse and not take away the spark and the entrepreneurship and their operating processes and methods and culture that make them what they are. So I think recognizing that and knowing kind of when to integrate and when not to integrate is those are pretty mature decisions in the organization.
Mm-hmm. I want to take a minute there and touch on something you had said as one of your first bullet points in the talent due diligence, because I do have a couple of questions on that, and people asking, could you briefly describe what your talent due diligence process was?
Yeah, I can tell you what it was, and then I can probably tell you what I think it maybe could have been. We have a process when we make salaried hires here. We have an assessment process we put people through, and we operate that through a local organization called Beatrice Hallweg International, and we affectionately refer to it as the BHI. And it is a talent assessment process. It was here before I came to the company, and it does a very good job of telling us, will this specific individual fit well in our culture, and what are their capabilities, and do they align with the competencies that are required in a particular role. And so, we felt a little self-conscious. I think our senior VP of Sales and Marketing said, we don't want to walk in a room and tell them to take out a number 2 pencil and a big cheap tablet, and we're going to give them a test, straight up. But I would say during due diligence, we put together some structured formats for everyone who was going out and visiting to go through some rigor to evaluate the quality of the people they were meeting. And certainly in the senior leadership team, we made some very quick early decisions that I'm really glad we did. And as a result, in some cases with Wayne Dalton, some of their senior leadership took over in some key roles for our organization, and vice versa. But so there is kind of the informal one that we did, and quite frankly, I wish we would have applied a little more rigor earlier with assessment processes to really get a view of what we had earlier on. I think the end result of that would have been our ability to get that day one org chart done earlier, and our inability to really get an empirical handle on the quality of the people delayed that.
Okay, great. Well, I think we have time for about one more question. So I think we'll close with this one. What are, after you've done your second survey now, and thinking back to some of the cultural integration issues and action planning that you did for year one, what are some of the things that you're focusing on for year two, and how are they relating to the year one integration efforts?
Good. Yeah, I would say in some cases it's just continuing to work on some of the issues that we saw earlier on, in several of the quadrants. As a larger organization under the umbrella of JSOX, we had lamented our lack of speed for a long time. I think highly successful organizations these days are quick to market, quick to make changes, quick to resolve issues for customers, and to get things going and do business faster. With more layers and, as I said, a more planful organization and lots of sort of pit stops and checkpoints along the way associated with JSOCs, we're a little bit clunkier. It's like turning a battleship in a bathtub. We also had dual systems. I alluded earlier to us being in the process of an ERP selection, and we have a dual system issue, neither of, or both of which were sort of legacy systems, and neither of which was very effective. So if we consolidate plants, we wind up with part numbers on two different systems that make it just almost impossible for us to do an effective job and fast to customers. And we know, meantime, all of our competitors are out there visiting our customers saying, hey, these guys are in the middle of an acquisition, they're not going to be able to deal with your issues, they're going to be in turmoil for a long time, let us be your new supplier. And so we had to be quick to our customers and that kind of thing. So I think I think the script for us pretty much remains the same. As we look at our action plans, from the first time to the second time, it's just to redouble our efforts with communication, redouble our efforts with involving people and letting them be part of the solution. And again, we're trying to be faster. We're looking at business processes. We've retained an outside group to help us make our business processes more efficient, quicker, more effective, and I think that's going to help us a lot. And it's something we became aware of because we saw how a competitor does business and how quickly they can get things done.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much. Are there any final words that either of you would like to leave us with?
Well, I'd just like to say thanks again for this opportunity. And I was surprised when Keystone approached us about this. I said, in order to talk to people and tell them how you think something should be done, don't you have to do it well somewhere first? We're probably more self-critical as we post-mortem this process and think about the things that we could have and should have done. But again, just the big points are getting a partner early and that kind of thing. And I think being more empirical about the talent process, and we have a leadership training program, and it's called the 7 Surefire Steps, and one of them is communicate, 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 and I'd probably add a 4th one on there. So I think just certainly communicating well is a big deal. I'd also like to say that if any of you have questions, I've listed on this slide, you can see my email address, and I'd be glad to answer any of those that we can. So I know Jeff probably has a thing or two to say.
Well, I too appreciate the opportunity. Ken's being a bit humble. It was actually a very successful deal from I think all the original objectives in terms of financial targets and retaining the right people and all that sort of thing. And his group did a fantastic job. I guess the only last thing I would comment on is one of the things that they did really well, and it was odd because Ken's an HR guy, but they made it a lot of fun. Ken's got these kind of unique things he likes to bring to the table, and I know at a couple of the meetings that we conduct, kickoff meetings and that kind of stuff, which at times can be a bit dull, they injected some activities and a couple videos and all that sort of thing that actually brought it to life. So and it really brought the two companies together, which was important early on to make sure that not only was the acquirer getting their oar in the water, but the target company had people that were involved in the process, which makes it a better outcome and also helps you with some of the talent evaluation when you put target people in key roles on these integration teams, you get a good sense for what they're like. So I certainly wouldn't minimize that part of it. Have a little bit of fun with it, and get people working together as quickly as you can. So, but again, thank you for the opportunity, and I too would welcome any further questions or comments anyone might have.
Well, wonderful. Thank you to you both for doing this and for joining us today. And thank you to all of our audience members for being part of our webinar and joining us today. Thank you for all the great questions you sent in as well. Sorry if we didn't get to all of them today. There were so many. If you're interested in learning more or would like to contact Ken or Jeff, please let me know, or contact them directly. That would be great too. I wish to wish you all a happy summer and hope that you'll join us for our next webinar that's going to actually take place on September 1st. We're going to feature Farrah Palumbo, the Chief Human Resources Officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, and talk about the culture transformation process that Blue Cross has been undertaking over the last 18 months. I was lucky enough to spend some time with them just yesterday and the day before, and gave a presentation with them in North Carolina, and they have a great story to tell. If you liked the Avaya story that happened last month, you'll really like this one as well. So watch your email for an invitation coming from that, and thank you very much. Have a great summer. Thank you again to our presenters, Ken and Jeff, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.